Filthy Terran pigs, the Krulin commander spat, venom dripping from his fangs. You think the humans are coming to save you? You're already dead. Commander Gruus gripped the tactical display, his hands trembling with rage. On the view screen, the besieged Nausicaan colony burned, defenseless against the invading Krulin armada. Gruus had staked everything on this desperate last stand, his lone warship the only thing between the Krulin and the slaughter of millions. Gruus checked the long-range sensors again. No sign of the reinforcements promised by the Nausicaan homeworld. They were still days away. The colony's distress calls to the Galactic Council had gone unanswered, the cowardly council species unwilling to challenge the Krulin's brutal aggression. Gruus punched the bulkhead, despair welling up inside him. It couldn't end like this. Suddenly sirens blared, multiple warp signatures on an intercept course. Gruus tensed, expecting Krulin reinforcements to finish him off, but instead, the IFF codes grit into United Terran Confederation Navy transponders. "This is Captain Zhang of the UTCN Hornet," a human voice crackled over the comm. "Hold tight, Commander Gruus, the cavalry's here." Gruus could only stare in disbelief as human warships, overflowing with weapons, dropped out of warp and took up formation alongside his battered cruiser. He'd heard tales of humanity's rising military power, but to see them challenge the Krulin, it defied belief. The Krulin commander's image flickered onto the view screen, his reptilian face contorted with rage. "Withdraw immediately, humans! This is not your fight!" Captain Zhang laughed coldly. "I'm making it my fight, you genocidal son of a bitch. The Nausicaans are under Terran protection now. Back off or get burned." Incensed, the Krulin commander cut the transmission. Gruus turned to face the human captain's stolid image on his bridge monitor. "Why?" Gruus asked hoarsely. "Why risk war with the Krulin to protect us? You owe us nothing." Zhang's reply was instant and firm. "You called for help, we answered. That's what humans do. Now let's send these bastards straight to hell." The Krulin opened fire, lances of plasma hammering against the human ship's shields. The humans returned fire with a storm of missiles and beams, tearing into the Krulin formation. Gruus watched in awe. Maybe, just maybe, they would survive. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same. On the bridge of the TSS Indomitable, Captain Richard Clark barked orders to his crew as they clashed with the Krulin fleet. He had fought these scaly bastards before and knew their tricks. As the human ships closed in, exchanging fire with the enemy, Clark hailed Commander Gruus on a secure channel. "Commander, I've tangled with the Krulin before. Their ships pack a hell of a punch from the front, but their sides and rear are softer targets. If we can get behind them, we can tear them a new one." Gruus blinked in surprise at the human's forthright sharing of tactical intel, but he quickly saw the sense in Clark's plan. "Understood, Captain. I will follow your lead." The Terran and Nausicaan ships moved as one, maneuvering to outflank the Krulin formation. The Indomitable launched a salvo of antimatter torpedoes, the glowing projectiles slamming into the unshielded rear of a massive Krulin dreadnought. The mighty warship lurched, engines guttering out as secondary explosions rippled through its hull. Gruus' cruiser followed up with a volley of searing fusion beams, cutting deep into the cripplet dreadnought's armor. The behemoth went dark, drifting lifelessly. The human Nausicaan duo pressed their advantage, systematically targeting the Krulin capital ships. On the Indomitable's gunnery deck, Lieutenant Travis Hawkins worked his console with preternatural focus, his fingers dancing across the controls. His precise fire picked off Krulin point defense turrets with surgical precision, creating openings for the Nausicaan beam weapons to exploit. Krulin cruisers and battleships shuddered and broke apart under the onslaught, unable to bring their fearsome frontal firepower to bear. On the enemy flagship, the Krulin commander seethed with rage as he watched his fleet being dismantled. With a guttural roar, he rallied his remaining ships for an all-out attack, plotting a course that would smash through the human formation and ram Gruus's cruiser in a kamikaze strike. Time seemed to slow as the Krulin ships hurtled towards the human and Nausicaan vessels, their frontal cannons glowing with deadly intent. Gruss's hands tightened on the armrests of his command chair, bracing for the inevitable impact. But just as the enemy fleet was about to unleash their devastating salvo, Captain Clark's voice crackled over the comm. "All ships, execute Omega-3 maneuver on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." In a blinding flash, the human ships vanished, only to reappear an instant later behind the Krulin formation. The reptilian warships, carried forward by their own momentum, found themselves suddenly exposed and vulnerable. Before they could react, the human fleet opened fire, pouring a relentless storm of ordnance into their unprotected rear quarters. Gruss watched in amazement as the Krulin ships shuddered and convulsed under the onslaught, their hulls splitting open like ripe fruit. Massive explosions blossomed along their length as their reactors went critical, consuming the once mighty vessels in balls of searing plasma. "Incredible," Gruss breathed, his eyes wide. "I've never seen such a precise in-system warp before. The energy required must be immense." As if reading his thoughts, Clark's face appeared on the interface, a grin splitting his rugged features. "Just a little trick we picked up in our scraps with the Krulin. Gotta hand it to our engineers. They know how to squeeze every last drop out of our reactors." Gruss shook his head in wonder. Once again, the humans had proven themselves full of surprises. Their technology, their tactics, their sheer audacity. It was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Clark's expression grew serious. "Commander Gruss, I want you to know that we're in this fight to the end. The Nausicaan people will not stand alone against the Krulin's aggression. If the Council species won't fulfill their duty to protect the innocent, then humanity will take up that banner ourselves." Gruss felt a lump form in his throat. He had never expected such unwavering support, such selfless commitment to a cause not their own. As the last Krulin ship disintegrated under the human onslaught, he began to realize that the Terrans were a breed apart from the self-serving powers that had long dominated galactic affairs. "Orbital space is clear," Clark announced, "but our job's not done yet. I'm sending in the Marines to secure the colony and root out any Krulin holdouts on the ground." He paused, a glint in his eye. "Care to join us planetside, Commander? I think you'll be impressed by what our ground pounders can do." Gruss straightened in his seat, a fierce smile spreading across his face. "It would be my honor, Captain. Let's show these scaly bastards the true meaning of human Nausicaan cooperation." As the dropships descended through the smoke-filled skies of the embattled colony, Gruss felt a renewed surge of hope. Against all odds, they had held the line, and with humanity at their side, they would march forward into a brighter future, one where the strong defended the weak, and where the light of justice could never be extinguished. As the Terran dropships descended through the war-torn skies, the extent of the Krulin's brutality became clear. Pillars of smoke rose from the ruined buildings of the once thriving Nausicaan settlement, the air thick with the stench of death and destruction. Captain Clark's face was a mask of stone as he surveyed the grim scene, his eyes hard with a cold, controlled anger. The dropships touched down on the outskirts of the colony, disgorging the human and Nausicaan troops. As they established a perimeter, a holoscreen crackled to life, revealing the sneering visage of General Kravok. The Krulin warlord stood in what appeared to be the colony's central control room, his clawed hand resting on the shoulder of a bloodied Nausicaan prisoner. "Behold the fate of those who defy the Krulin dominion," Kravok snarled, his reptilian eyes glinting with malice. "Your precious colony is now mine, and the lives of its people are forfeit. Even now my soldiers revel in the spoils of conquest, and the streets run red with Nausicaan blood." Clark's expression resolute, his trigger finger twitching with the urge to put a plasma bolt through the sadistic bastard's skull. But he forced himself to remain calm, to think tactically. "This is your one chance, Kravok," he growled. "Surrender now, and I promise you'll live to see a trial." Kravok threw back his head and laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Surrender? To a pack of hairless apes and their pathetic allies? I think not, human. You haven't the spine to do what must be done. Even now the colony's reactor is rigged to detonate at my command. One false move and I'll reduce this settlement to a radioactive crater." Clark's eyes narrowed. He knew Kravok's reputation, knew the Krulin general would not hesitate to carry out his threat. A frontal assault was out of the question, but there were other ways to wage war. He turned to Commander Gruss, the Nausicaan officer's face etched with barely contained fury. "Commander, I need your help. You know this colony better than anyone. If we can get a strike team inside, we might have a chance to disable that reactor and take Kravok down." Gruss nodded grimly. "I know a way in through the maintenance tunnels, but it won't be easy. Kravok will have them guarded." "Leave that to me," Clark said. He keyed his comm. "Lieutenant Hawkins, assemble a strike team. I want our best infiltrators and demolitions experts. We're going in quiet and fast." As the strike team mustered, checking their weapons and gear, Gruss watched with a mix of admiration and trepidation. These humans were a different breed from the soldiers he'd known. They moved with a fluid precision, a coiled lethality that spoke of countless battles fought and won. And in their eyes he saw something else. Not the dull obedience of conscripts, but the fire of true believers, warriors driven by a cause greater than themselves. Clark saw the look on Gruss's face and clapped a hand on the Nausicaan's shoulder. "I know what you're thinking," he said softly. "That we're crazy for even attempting this. But sometimes, crazy is all you've got. My people have a saying, 'Who dares, wins,' and today we dare." As the strike team moved out, slipping silently into the warren of tunnels beneath the colony, Gruss felt a flicker of hope amidst the despair. The humans were a wild card, an unpredictable force that defied the old rules of galactic warfare. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was exactly what was needed to turn the tide against the Krulind. But as they ventured deeper into the enemy-held colony, picking their way through the rubble-strewn passages, Gruss couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the jaws of hell itself. Kravok was a monster, a sadist, who delighted in the suffering of others, and now he held the lives of thousands in his clawed grasp. Gruss gripped his rifle tighter, his grip strengthening beneath his battle gloves. He thought of his people, the brave Nausicans who had fought and bled for this colony, only to see it fall to the Krulin's cruelty. He thought of the humans beside him, so ready to risk everything for a world not their own. And he made a silent vow to the spirits of his ancestors and to the human warriors who now stood with him. They would not fail. They could not fail, for the sake of the innocent, for the sake of all that was good and just in this universe. They would find a way to stop Kravok and his monstrous plans. The strike team crept through the deserted streets, moving from shadow to shadow with practiced ease. Gruss took point, his intimate knowledge of the colony's layout guiding them through narrow alleyways and maintenance tunnels, avoiding the bulk of Kravok's patrols. When an isolated sentry blocked their path, Sergeant Yoshida moved in, her monomolecular blade flashing in a swift, silent arc. The Krulin soldier crumpled without a sound, his reptilian throat sliced clean through. As they neared the reactor complex, the signs of the Krulin's brutal occupation became impossible to ignore. The once bustling plaza had been transformed into a nightmarish prison camp, its perimeter lined with force cages and razor wire. Nausicaan civilians huddled together, their faces gaunt and haunted. Krulin guards stalked among them, lashing out with shock batons and serrated blades, their sadistic laughter mingling with the prisoners' cries of pain. Gruss's hands tightened around his rifle, his blood boiling at the sight of his people's suffering. Every fiber of his being screamed to attack, to tear into the Krulind with righteous fury and make them pay for every atrocity. But Clark's hand on his shoulder steadied him, the human's voice a low, insistent murmur in his ear. "Easy, Commander. I know it's hard, but we have to stay focused. The hostages are counting on us. We stick to the plan." Gruss exhaled slowly, forcing down the rage that threatened to consume him. Clark was right. They had to disable the reactor failsafe first. Vengeance would come later. They reached the reactor control room, a squat bunker filled with sensor arrays and gun turrets. A squad of Krulind shock troopers stood guard, their black armor gleaming in the harsh floodlights. Clark signaled his team into position, his hand counting down. 3, 2, 1. They struck like lightning, breaching charges blowing the reinforced door off its hinges. The Krulin reacted with inhuman speed, plasma bolts and razor-tipped darts filling the air, but the humans were just as fast, their return fire scything through the enemy ranks with ruthless precision. Gruss was in the thick of it, his rifle bucking in his hands as he put bolt after bolt into the Krulin's armored bodies. A shock trooper lunged at him, talons extended, but Gruss sidestepped the blow and rammed his bayonet through the reptilian's eye socket. Hot blood sprayed across his face as he kicked the twitching corpse away. All around him, the strike team fought with fierce dedication, matching the Krulin's ferocity blow for blow. Private Ramirez, the squad's saw gunner, laid down a blistering suppressive fire, the heavy slugs from his weapon tearing through the enemy's cover without effort. Sergeant Yoshida was a blur of motion, her blade flashing as she danced among the Krulin, leaving a trail of severed limbs and gushing throats in her wake. Gruss found himself fighting back-to-back with Captain Clark, the two warriors moving in perfect sync as they cut down the last of the shock troopers. As the final Krulin fell, its chest a smoking ruin, Gruss met Clark's eyes, seeing his own fierce pride reflected there. They had fought as one, human and Nausicaan, united by a bond forged in blood and fire. Yoshida was already at the control console, her fingers flying over the holographic interface. Gruss watched in amazement as she navigated the alien system with ease, her face a mask of concentration. With a final triumphant keystroke, she looked up, a fierce grin splitting her face. "Fail-safes disabled, Captain. This reactor won't be blowing up any time soon." But before they could savor their victory, alarms blared throughout the complex, a strident klaxon that set Gruss's teeth on edge. Red lights pulsed on the control room's tactical display, a swarm of hostile contacts converging on their position. "They've made us," Clark growled. "We need to move now." Gruss hesitated, his eyes fixated on the flashing icon that marked Kravok's command post. They were so close, the chance to capture the hated general and end his reign of terror tantalizingly within reach. Clark saw the look on his face and clasped his shoulder, his grip firm but understanding. "I know, Commander. I want to take that bastard down as much as you do. But we've done what we came here to do. We've bought your people a fighting chance. Now we need to make sure we live to see this through." Gruss focused his mind, the words tasting like ashes in his mouth. But he knew Clark was right. They had to withdraw, to regroup and plan their next move. The battle for the colony was nowhere near the end. As the strike team fought their way back through the winding corridors, plasma bolts sizzling past their heads, Gruss could feel the weight of his people's fate bearing down on him. But he also felt a new spark of hope kindling in his chest. The humans had proven themselves true allies, warriors of courage and conviction, who would stop at nothing to see justice done. Together, they would free his people from the Krulin's tyranny. Together, they would make Kravok pay for his crimes, and together they would forge a new future for the galaxy, one where the strong stood as guardians of the weak, and where the light of freedom could never be extinguished. But first, they had to survive. As the colony's walls loomed ahead of them, the sounds of pursuit growing louder by the second, Gruss steeled himself for the fight to come. He may have failed to capture Kravok today, but he swore by all the gods of Nausicaa that he would not rest until the general was brought to justice. For his people, for the humans who fought beside him, and for the innocent lives shattered by the Krulin's cruelty, he would see this through to the bitter end. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Gruss sprinted through the war-torn streets, his lungs burning with exertion. Behind him, the enraged bellows of Krulin soldiers echoed off the shattered buildings, their pounding footsteps growing ever closer. Gruss ducked into a collapsed structure, hoping to lose his pursuers in the rubble-strewn maze. But the Krulin were relentless, their hunters fanning out to cut off his escape. Gruss gripped his pulse rifle tighter, checking the power cell. Nearly depleted. He gritted his teeth. He would make every shot count. A flicker of movement caught his eye, and Gruss whirled, squeezing off a burst of searing plasma. The Krulin hunter crumpled, his chest a smoking ruin, but more took his place, their reptilian eyes glinting with cruel anticipation. They knew they had him cornered. Gruss fought like a man possessed, his rifle spitting death with every trigger pull. Krulin fell, their armor scorched and punctured, but still they came on, heedless of their losses. Gruss's weapon hissed, the power cell spent. He drew his combat blade, preparing to sell his life dearly. Suddenly the air was filled with a new sound, the telltale whoomp of plasma grenades. Explosions rocked the Krulin positions, scattering the hunters like leaves in a gale. Gruss looked up to see Clark and Yoshida on a nearby rooftop, raining down suppressive fire on the enemy. "Commander," Clark shouted over the din of battle, "we've got you covered. Move!" Gruss needed no second bidding. He surged from cover, blade flashing as he cut down the disoriented Krulin in his path. Clark and Yoshida laid down a blistering barrage, plasma bolts stitching a deadly pattern around Gruss as he fought his way to their position. At last Gruss reached the rooftop, his armor scorched and pitted but his spirit unbroken. Clark clasped his shoulder, a fierce grin on his soot-streaked face. "Couldn't let you have all the fun, Commander. What do you say we get the hell out of here?" Gruss nodded, too winded to speak. Together, the three warriors raced across the rooftops, leaping from building to building as they made their way towards the extraction point. In the distance, Gruss could see the rest of the strike team, holding the LZ against a tide of Krulin reinforcements. But as they approached the final stretch, a figure emerged from the smoke and rubble blocking their path. General Kravok stood before them, encased in heavy-powered armor, a massive plasma cannon cradled in his arms. The warlord's eyes blazed with fury as he beheld the human and Nausicaan warriors. "Gruss," Kravok snarled, his voice dripping with contempt, "you dare defy me, you who can't even defend your own people without the aid of these hairless apes?" Gruss stiffened, rage boiling up inside him at the insult to his honor and the honor of his human comrades. He stepped forward, ready to meet Kravok's challenge, but Clark's hand on his arm stopped him. "This isn't just your fight, Commander," the human captain said quietly. "We came here to stand with you, and that's what we're going to do, together." Gruss looked into Clark's eyes and saw the unwavering grit there, the unshakable commitment to seeing this through to the end. He nodded, a fierce smile spreading across his face. As one, the human and Nausicaan warriors charged, plasma fire and razor-sharp talons flashing in a deadly dance. Kravok roared his defiance, his cannon spewing destruction, but Clark and Gruss moved like a well-oiled machine, weaving and dodging, striking and feinting. Clark rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding a searing plasma bolt, and came up firing. His shot struck Kravok's cannon, sparks flying as the weapon's power cell ruptured. The warlord howled in rage, throwing aside the useless gun and drawing a wicked-looking blade. Gruss leaped forward, his own blade clashing against Kravok's in a shower of sparks. The two combatants strained against each other, muscles bulging, teeth bared in feral snarls. But Gruss had the advantage of speed and agility, honed by years of training and tempered by the righteous fury burning in his heart. With a final mighty blow, Gruss shattered Kravok's blade and sent the warlord sprawling. The Nausicaan commander stood over his foe, chest heaving, the tip of his sword poised at Kravok's throat. "Go on, then," the Krulin spat, hatred etched in every line of his face. "Finish it, take your revenge." Gruss's hand trembled on his sword hilt, every fiber of his being crying out for vengeance. But as he looked to Clark, he saw in the human's eyes not the bloodlust of a killer, but the steady grit of a guardian, a protector. With a shuddering breath, Gruss lowered his blade. "No," he growled. "You will face justice for your crimes, Kravok. But it will be justice under the law, not the law of the jungle." Clark nodded, a look of quiet approval on his face as he stepped forward to secure the defeated warlord. "Commander Gruss is right," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "We're better than this. We have to be." As the human and Nausicaan forces regrouped, the tide of battle began to turn. With Kravok in custody and his command structure in disarray, the Krulin troops fell into confusion and disorganization. Gruss and Clark pressed their advantage, leading their warriors in a fierce counterattack that drove the invaders back, street by blood-soaked street. In the liberated sectors of the colony, word began to spread of the heroic stand made by Grus and his human allies. Nausicaan civilians, once cowering in fear, now took up arms and joined the fight, their spirits rekindled by the selfless bravery of their defenders. What had begun as a desperate holding action had become something more, something greater. It had become a symbol of hope, a beacon of defiance against the darkness of tyranny and oppression. And at the heart of it all, two warriors, one human, one Nausicaan, stood side by side, united by a bond forged in the crucible of battle and tempered by the unbreakable strength of their shared convictions. The fight for the colony was just getting started, but one thing was certain. The Krulin would learn, as so many before them had learned, the true cost of challenging the indomitable spirit of free peoples, of underestimating the power of unity in the face of evil. Grus stood in the center of the shattered colony, the acrid stench of smoke and death filling his nostrils. All around him, the once thriving settlement lay in ruins, a testament to the Krulin's savage occupation and the terrible price of liberation. Beside him, Captain Clark surveyed the devastation with haunted eyes. The human's face was smeared with grime and blood, his armor scorched and pitted from the ferocious final assault. Grus knew that beneath the captain's stoic exterior, he mourned the loss of his fallen comrades. Grus's own heart ached with a grief that threatened to consume him. So many friends, so many loved ones, lost to the Krulin's cruelty. And Sergeant Yoshida, the fiery human warrior who had fought with such skill and courage, to think that she would never again flash that fierce, defiant grin as she charged into battle. But even amidst the sorrow and the pain, Grus could see the first fragile stirrings of hope. The Nausicaan survivors, bloodied but unbroken, were already beginning to pick through the rubble, tending to the wounded and gathering what supplies remained. In their eyes, Grus saw newfound strength, a purpose to rebuild and to never again submit to tyranny. "Your people are strong," Clark said softly, as if reading Grus's thoughts. "They've been through hell, but they haven't lost their spirit. That's rare, and it's precious." Grus nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "They have seen what true courage looks like in the actions of your Marines, and in the sacrifices of those who fell. That is a lesson they will not soon forget." In the distance, the whine of dropship engines heralded the arrival of reinforcements from the Terran Confederation and the Nausicaan homeworld. Medics and engineers poured from the landing craft, ready to begin the long, hard work of rebuilding and healing. But Grus knew that this was only the beginning. The Krulin had been beaten back, but they would return. And there were countless other worlds still suffering under their brutality, crying out for the same aid that had come to his people in their darkest hour. "This fight is a long way to go," he said, his voice hard with purpose. "The Krulin will not stop until they are made to stop. And the Council, they must be held to account for their cowardice and their complicity." Clark met his gaze, a fire burning in the human's eyes. "We'll be there," he promised, "every step of the way. The Terran Confederation stands with the Nausicaan people and with all those who refuse to bow to tyranny. We'll build a galaxy where scum like the Krulin can't prey on the innocent, no matter how long it takes or what the cost." He extended his hand, and Grus clasped it firmly, feeling the calluses of a warrior's grip against his palm. In that moment, he knew that the bond forged between their peoples would not be easily broken. "I'll hold you to that, Captain," Grus said, a faint smile tugging at his lips despite the solemnity of the moment. "And I'll be right there beside you, fighting for that better future, no matter what it takes, no matter what sacrifices we must endure, for the sake of my people and for the sake of all those who still need our help." Clark nodded, his own smile a mirror of Grus's own. "I wouldn't have it any other way, Commander. Together we'll show the galaxy what it means to stand up for what's right, what it means to be heroes." As the two warriors turned to join the relief efforts, Grus felt a new sense of purpose taking root in his heart. The road ahead would be lengthy and challenging, and the scars of this conflict would linger for years to come. But with allies like the humans at their side, the Nausicaans would never have to face the darkness alone. And Gruss silently vowed that he would spend the rest of his days striving to be worthy of the trust and the friendship that the humans had shown. He would lead his people with the same selfless courage that Clark and his Marines had demonstrated, putting the needs of others before his own and fighting for justice no matter the odds. For he had seen the true face of heroism, and he knew that as long as there were those who would answer the call, there would always be hope. Even in the darkest of times, even against the most terrible of foes, the light of righteousness could not be extinguished. It was a lesson that Gruss would carry with him for the rest of his life, a beacon to guide him through the trials to come. And as he set to work alongside the human engineers, clearing rubble and erecting temporary shelters, he felt the first small stirrings of pride amidst the sorrow. His people had suffered, and the wounds would be slow to heal, but they had not been broken, and they would not face the future alone. With the humans by their side, they would rebuild. They would grow stronger, and they would stand ready to face whatever challenges the galaxy might throw at them next. For the first time in a long time, Gruss allowed himself to believe that a better tomorrow was possible, and he silently swore that he would do whatever it took to make that dream a reality. Amidst the smouldering ruins of the Nausicaan colony, Gruss and Clark picked their way through the rubble of the Krulin command post. The stench of burnt plasteel and charred flesh hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of the fierce battle that had raged just hours before. As they sifted through the debris, Gruss's foot struck something hard and metallic. He knelt down, brushing aside the ash to reveal a partially melted data core. "Captain, over here," he called out, his voice rough with exhaustion and smoke. Clark joined him, his brow furrowing as he examined the device. "Looks like a command-level data hub. If we can salvage anything from it, it might give us some insight into the Krulin's real objectives here." Together, they carefully extracted the core and brought it back to the Terran flagship for analysis. In the ship's secure data lab, a team of Terran intelligence officers worked feverishly to crack the core's encryption and recover its contents. Hours turned into days as the team labored, until finally they managed to extract a series of heavily encoded communications. As the messages were decrypted and displayed on the holoscreen, Gruss and Clark felt a growing sense of unease. The communications revealed that the attack on the Nausicaan colony was not an isolated incident, but part of a much larger and more insidious plan. The Krulin, it seemed, were acting on the orders of a mysterious figure known only as the Overseer. "Who is this Overseer?" Gruss asked, his eyes scanning the intercepted messages. "And what does he want?" Clark shook his head, his expression grim. "I don't know, but from what we've uncovered here, it looks like he's been manipulating conflicts across the galaxy for years, maybe even decades, pitting races against each other, stoking old hatreds and rivalries." Gruss's fists clenched at his sides. "But why? What does he gain from all this bloodshed and chaos?" "Power," Clark said softly. "As long as the galaxy remains divided, as long as we're all too busy fighting each other to see the real threat, he can continue to operate in the shadows, pulling the strings." A cold realization settled over Gruss. The battle for the Nausicaan colony, as brutal and costly as it had been, was just a small skirmish in a much larger war, a war that threatened the very foundations of galactic order. He turned to Clark, a steely commitment hardening in his gut. "We have to stop him, Captain. We have to find this Overseer and bring him to justice at any expense." Clark nodded, his teeth clenched. "Agreed. But it won't be easy. From what we've seen here, the Overseer's network extends into every corner of the galaxy. He has spies and agents in every government, every military, every corporation. Rooting him out will be like trying to catch a shadow." Gruss's eyes gleamed with a fierce light. "Then we'll just have to be smarter, faster and more relentless than he is. We'll follow every lead, chase down every rumor, until we have enough evidence to expose him and his schemes to the galaxy." As they prepared to embark on this new mission, alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. Gruss and Clark raced to the bridge, only to be met with a scene of utter devastation. The bridge was a smoking ruin, consoles sparking and debris strewn everywhere. The bodies of Terran officers lay sprawled across the deck, their lifeless eyes staring sightlessly at the shattered viewports. In the center of the carnage stood a lone figure, a Krulin warrior, his scales blackened with soot and his eyes blazing with fanatical fury. "For the Overseer!" he screamed, before detonating the explosive device strapped to his chest. The blast threw Gruss and Clark off their feet, slamming them into the bulkhead with bone-crushing force. As darkness closed in around him, Gruss's last thought was of the insidious reach of the Overseer and the terrible price they had just paid for daring to challenge him. Gruss awoke in the medbay, his body racked with pain and his knees going weak from the shock of the attack. As his vision cleared, he saw the ashen faces of the Terran medics, their eyes haunted by the horrors they had witnessed. "Commander Gruss," one of them said softly, stepping forward. I'm so sorry, Captain Clark, he didn't make it." The words hit Gruss like a physical blow, driving the air from his lungs. Richard Clark, the human who had stood by his side through the darkest of times, who had fought and bled for a world not his own, gone, just like that. As grief and rage warred within him, Gruss forced himself to sit up, ignoring the searing pain in his ribs. "The bridge, the crew," he managed to rasp out. The medic shook his head, his expression bleak. 18 dead, dozens more wounded. The Krulin saboteur, he must have been a sleeper agent, triggered by some kind of fail-safe protocol. We never saw it coming. Gruss hit his fist into the bulkhead, welcoming the flare of pain that shot up his arm. Pain was good. Pain meant he was still alive, still able to fight. And fight he would, for Clark, for the brave Terran crew who had given their lives, for every soul the Overseer had ever manipulated or destroyed. This was a long way to go. As he struggled to his feet, a Terran officer approached, a datapad in his hand. "Commander Gruss, sir, we found this in Captain Clark's quarters. It was meant for you." With trembling hands, Gruss took the datapad and activated it. The holographic image of Richard Clark sprang to life, the captain's face etched with unwavering commitment. "Gruss, if you're seeing this, then I'm dead, and the Overseer's made his move," the recording began. "I've compiled all the evidence we've gathered on his activities and uploaded it to the secure Terran intelligence network. It's not enough to take him down, not yet, but it's a start." Clark's image flickered, his voice growing urgent. "You have to finish what we started, Gruss. You have to find the Overseer and bring him to justice, no matter how long it takes or how far you have to go. The destiny of the universe depends on it." The recording ended, and Gruss found himself staring at his own reflection in the darkened screen. His face was gaunt and battered, but his eyes burned with a newfound dedication. "I will find him, Richard," he whispered, his voice a solemn oath. "I will hunt him to the ends of the universe if I have to, and when I do, I will make him pay for every life he's destroyed, every world he's shattered. This I swear." As Gruss limped out of the medbay, he knew that the road ahead would be long and treacherous. The Overseer's web of lies and manipulation spanned the galaxy, and untangling it would be a task that might well consume the rest of his life. But he also knew that he would not be alone. The bonds forged between the Norsicans and the humans in the crucible of battle could not be broken. Together, they would form the core of a new resistance, a secret army dedicated to rooting out the Overseer and his minions wherever they hid. It would be a war fought in the shadows, a war of whispers and secrets, of betrayal and sacrifice, but it was a war that had to be fought, for the sake of every being in the galaxy who yearned to live free from the Overseer's malevolent influence. As Gruss boarded the shuttle that would take him back to the Norsican colony, now a rallying point for this new resistance, he paused to look back at the Terran flagship one last time. His eyes fell on the hastily erected memorial wall, the names of the fallen etched into its polished surface. So many names, so many lives cut short by the Overseer's machinations. Gruss's gaze lingered on one name in particular, Richard Clark, captain, friend, brother-in-arms, a man who had given everything for a cause greater than himself. Straightening his shoulders, Gruss snapped a crisp salute, a final gesture of respect and gratitude. Then, with a last long look at the stars, he turned and strode up the shuttle ramp. Out there, somewhere in the vast expanse of space, the Overseer was waiting, spinning his webs and pulling his strings. But his days were numbered. For Gruss and his allies were coming for him, a rising tide of justice and retribution that would not be denied. No matter how long it took, no matter what the cost, they would see the Overseer brought to account for his crimes. The galaxy would be free, or they would die trying. Gruss crouched behind the shattered remnants of a wall, his pulse rifle clutched tight. Around him the sounds of battle raged, the sizzle of plasma fire, the guttural war cries of a dozen alien races, the screams of the dying. He glanced over at the human marine beside him, a grizzled veteran named Hawkins. "Just like old times, eh, Commander?" Hawkins quipped, a mirthless grin on his soot-stained face. Gruss grunted in response, too focused on the task at hand for banter. They were in the heart of the Overseer's stronghold, a sprawling labyrinth of fortified bunkers and twisting tunnels. Somewhere in this maze of death, the mastermind himself was hiding, directing his forces in a desperate last stand. A plasma bolt sizzled overhead, close enough to singe the tips of Gruss' crest. He returned fire, his pulse rifle spitting supersonic death. A Krulin warrior, one of the Overseer's elite guard, fell with a gurgling cry, his chest a smoking ruin. Gruss felt a hand on his shoulder. It was his son Talos, young and fierce in his battle armor. "Father, we must press on. The Overseer's command center is just ahead." Gruss nodded, a surge of pride and fear warring in his chest. Talos had grown into a fine warrior, every bit as brave and committed as Gruss himself, but the thought of losing him, here at the end of all things, was almost too much to bear. Together the three of them advanced, leapfrogging from cover to cover. All around them the battle raged. Terran Marines and Nausicaan warriors fought side by side, a well-oiled machine of destruction. But the Overseer's forces were fanatics, willing to spend their lives like water for their dark master. Inch by blood-soaked inch they pushed forward. The command center was in sight now, a looming bunker overflowing with gun emplacements and armored to withstand orbital bombardment. This was where the Overseer would make his final stand. Gruss signaled for a coordinated assault. Hawkins readied a breaching charge, while Talos and the other warriors took up positions to provide covering fire. On Gruss's signal, they moved. The charge blew the reinforced door off its hinges, and they stormed inside, weapons blazing. The Overseer's bodyguards, a mixed force of mercenaries and zealots, met them with a hail of fire. Gruss saw Hawkins go down, a plasma bolt burning through his chest plate. He fell, his rifle still spitting defiance. Gruss roared in anger and grief, laying down a blistering, suppressive fire. Beside him, Talos surged forward, his blade flashing in the smoky half-light. They fought like demons, father and son, carving a path of destruction through the enemy ranks. And then suddenly they were through. The command center lay before them, a cavernous room filled with flickering holoscreens and humming control panels. And there, at the center of it all, stood the Overseer himself. He was a nondescript figure, swathed in a plain grey robe, his face hidden in the shadows of a deep cowl. But when he spoke, his voice was like honey and poison, dripping with malice and cold amusement. "Commander Gruss, I have followed your little crusade with great interest. Such dedication, such fire. And all for what? To see your hopes dashed and your loved ones fall? You cannot stop what is to come. The wheels are already in motion." Gruss snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "It's over, Overseer. Your army is broken, your stronghold breached. Surrender, and you may yet live to see a trial." The Overseer laughed, a chilling sound that echoed in the cavernous space. "You still don't understand, do you? You think this is about armies and strongholds. This is about the very fabric of the galaxy, the forces that shape the rise and fall of civilizations. I have seen the patterns, the great cycles of history, and I know what must be done to bring order to the chaos." He gestured to the screens around him, each one showing a different world, a different conflict. "Behold my great work. With a whisper here, a nudge there, I have set in motion the events that will lead to a new galactic order, one where the strong rule and the weak serve, as it should be." Talos stepped forward, his young face twisted in disgust. "You're insane. You talk of order, but all you bring is suffering and death. How many have died for your twisted vision? How many more will you sacrifice?" The Overseer shrugged, a casual gesture that sent a spike of rage through Gruss's heart. "As many as it takes. The galaxy is a harsh mistress, young one. Only those willing to do what is necessary can hope to tame her." Gruss had heard enough. He raised his rifle, his finger on the trigger. "It ends here, Overseer. Your reign of terror is over." But before he could fire, the Overseer moved. With a speed that belied his unassuming appearance, he lashed out with a hidden blade, a monomolecular edge that could cut through armor like paper. Gruss tried to dodge, but he was too slow. He felt the blade bite into his side, a searing pain that took his breath away. He stumbled, his rifle clattering to the floor. Talos cried out in anger and charged, his own blade flashing. The Overseer met him with a cruel smile, and they clashed in a whirlwind of steel and sparks. Gruss struggled to rise, blood seeping from his wound. He watched in horror as the Overseer and Talos dueled, their blades a blur of deadly precision. Talos was good, but the Overseer was better. With a deft twist of his wrist, he sent Talos's blade spinning from his grasp. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Gruss saw the Overseer's blade arc towards Talos's unprotected throat, saw the look of triumph in the mastermind's eyes. And he knew, with a certainty that went beyond thought or reason, that he could not let it happen. With a roar of defiance, Gruss surged to his feet. He threw himself forward, his own body a shield against the Overseer's killing blow. He felt the blade sink into his chest, felt the hot rush of blood in his lungs. But he also saw Talos, alive and unhurt, his eyes wide with shock and grief, and he saw the Overseer, his smug triumph turning to disbelief as Gruss's fist closed around his throat. "For Richard," Gruss growled, blood bubbling on his lips. "For all those you've destroyed." With the last of his strength he squeezed. He felt the Overseer's windpipe collapse under his grip, felt the life leave the mastermind's body, and then he fell, darkness closing in around him. The last thing he saw was Talos's face, tears streaking through the grime and blood. "Father," he whispered, his voice breaking, "please, no." But Gruss had no words left, only a final, fleeting thought as the void claimed him. It was finished. The Overseer was dead, his dark dreams shattered. The galaxy would heal in time. And he, Gruss, had played his part. He had fought the good fight, had given all he had to give. He could rest now, knowing that the light he had fought for would endure. That hope, fragile and precious, would live on. His eyes closed and he knew no more. Gruss stood before the towering monument, his aged eyes tracing the intricate lines of the Nausicaan artisan's work. The polished stone gleamed in the sunlight, casting a warm glow over the assembled crowd. Humans and Nausicaans alike had gathered to witness this moment, a testament to the enduring bond between their peoples. At the heart of the monument, two figures stood back to back, their stances proud and unyielding. One was human, the other Nausicaan, their armor battered but their spirits unbroken. They faced outward, ready to confront any challenge, united in their dedication. Gruss stepped forward, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. "Today we honor the fallen," he began, his words carrying across the hushed gathering. "We remember the sacrifices made, the lives given in defense of what is right." He spoke of the battles fought, of the horrors witnessed and the triumphs earned. He spoke of Richard Clark, the human captain who had stood beside him in the darkest of times, whose courage and selflessness had inspired a generation. Captain Clark understood the true meaning of alliance, Gruss said, his voice thick with emotion. He knew that our strength lay not in our differences, but in our shared commitment to justice, to protecting the innocent and opposing tyranny wherever it reared its head. As he spoke, memories flooded Gruss's mind. He saw the flash of plasma fire, heard the cries of the wounded and the dying. He felt the weight of his pulse rifle in his hands, the heat of the explosion that had claimed Clark's life. But he also remembered the moments of camaraderie, the shared laughter and the quiet understanding. He remembered the look in Clark's eyes when they had finally brought down the overseer, the knowledge that they had made a difference, that their sacrifices had not been in vain. "The war may be over," Gruss said, his gaze sweeping over the assembled veterans. "But the fight continues. The galaxy is vast and filled with dangers, and there will always be those who seek to prey on the weak, to bend others to their will." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But we will be ready, humans and Nausicans standing together as we always have, for the alliance forged in the crucible of war cannot be broken. It is a bond of blood and honor, of shared purpose and unwavering commitment." As the ceremony drew to a close, Gruss found himself approached by a young human cadet, his uniform crisp and his eyes shining with earnest curiosity. "Commander Gruss," the cadet said, his voice filled with respect. "What was it like to fight alongside Captain Clark? To be part of something so important, so vital?" Gruss smiled, seeing in the young man's face the same eagerness, the same sense of duty that had driven Clark all those years ago. "It was an honor," he said simply, "and a privilege. To stand with those who are willing to give everything for what they believe in, to fight not for glory or gain but because it is right. That is a rare and precious thing." The cadet nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I want to be like that," he said quietly. "To make a difference, to protect those who can't protect themselves." "Then you have already taken the first step," Gruss replied, placing a hand on the young man's shoulder. "The path ahead will not be easy. You will face challenges and hardships, and there will be times when the darkness seems overwhelming. But remember this, you do not walk alone. You are part of something greater, a legacy of courage and sacrifice that stretches back generations." As he spoke, Gruss felt a sense of peace settle over him. The war had taken much from him, from all of them, but it had also given them something precious, a sense of purpose, a knowledge that they had made a difference. And as he looked out over the gathered crowd, at the faces of the humans and Nausicans united in their shared commitment to a better future, he knew that the fight would go on. They would face the challenges to come, as they always had, side by side, ready to defend what was right, regardless of the cost. For that was the true legacy of the Alliance, the gift that Richard Clark and so many others had given their lives to protect. And Gruss knew that he would spend the rest of his days honoring that legacy, carrying the torch forward into an uncertain future. The cadet stood straighter, his eyes gleaming with drive. "I won't let you down, Commander," he said, his voice firm with conviction. "I'll make sure that the sacrifices of Captain Clark and all the others were not in vain. I'll carry on their work, no matter what it takes." Gruss clasped the young man's arm, a warrior's grip. "I know you will," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The future is in good hands." And with that, he turned back to the monument, his gaze tracing the lines of the human and Nausicaan figures standing eternal vigil. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the gathered crowd, but Gruss paid it no mind. For he knew that even in the darkest of nights there was always hope, the hope that had sustained them through the long years of war, the hope that had driven them to stand against the overseer and his tyranny. It was the hope that burned in the hearts of the young, the fire that would light the way forward into an uncertain galaxy. And as long as that hope remained, as long as there were those willing to fight for what was right, Gruss knew that the legacy of the human-Nausicaan alliance would endure. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the years upon him. But it was a weight he bore gladly, for he knew that he had played his part, that he had made a difference. And in the end, that was all any warrior could ask for, to know that they had stood for something greater than themselves, that they had left the galaxy a better place than they had found it. Gruss opened his eyes, his gaze falling once more on the young cadet. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was also full of promise, full of young men and women like this one, ready to take up the fight, to carry on the legacy of those who had gone before. And as the last rays of the setting sun painted the monument in shades of gold and red, Grass felt a sense of contentment wash over him. The war was over, but the fight would go on. And he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Humans and Nausicans united in their willpower to build a better tomorrow. He turned to the cadet, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Come," he said, gesturing towards the gathered veterans. "Let me introduce you to some old friends. They have stories to tell, wisdom to share, and together we will ensure that the sacrifices of the past were not made in vain." The cadet fell into step beside him, eager to learn, to grow, to become part of something greater than himself. And as they walked towards the waiting crowd, Grass felt a renewed sense of purpose settle over him. There would be challenges ahead, battles to be fought and sacrifices to be made. But they would face them as they always had, with courage and honor, with the knowledge that they were part of a legacy that stretched back generations and would continue long after they were gone. For that was the true strength of the alliance, the bond that had been forged in the heat of war and tempered by the passing of years. It was a bond that could never be broken, a promise that would endure as long as there were those willing to fight for what was right. And fight they would, for as long as the stars burned in the sky and the galaxy spun on its axis. For they were the guardians of the future, the protectors of the innocent, the champions of justice. They were the heirs of Richard Clark, and all those who had given their lives in defense of what was good and true, and they would not rest until the galaxy was free from tyranny, until all beings could live in peace and security. That was the promise they had made, the oath they had sworn, and it was a promise they would keep despite the toll, no matter the sacrifice. For they were the alliance humans and Nausicans, standing together against the darkness, and together they would build a future worth fighting for. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.